Hello everyone, and once again welcome back to another video. More specifically, in this 11th YouTube video, I'm going to cover the forex markets in a bit more detail. As you know, this was the main reason behind me opening this channel in the first place. However, over the past couple of months, there's been plenty more interesting topics to cover, so naturally the forex world as such was slightly left behind. But we're now back, given the interesting times and circumstances. So as you know, over the past week, the stock market has been absolutely insane, breaking all the levels in terms of liquidity, volatility, bullish moves, bearish moves, so forth, all in the span of 1 or 2 weeks, which is incredible. So this is not to say that the forex market was an exception. In fact, as we can see from the weekly chart of the DXY, very strong impulse either to the downside or upside. We'll see later on that strongly correlates to what happens in the overall world on a daily basis. So the weekly time frame on the DXY, which is again the US dollar currency index, signaling the strength or weakness of the dollar against all the major foreign exchange currency pairs. So that would include the euro, the pound, the yen, the kiwi, the CAD, the Swiss franc, and so forth. So as we know, strong impulse to the upside just signals that this overall ascending channel that we've been respecting for a couple of years now has broken through, signaling perhaps a potential move to the upside even higher. However, diving deeper into the daily chart, we see a very clear image that this may not be the case, given the price action that took place on Friday. So again, this signals the daily chart is just price action on a daily basis for each candle. Then on Friday, we completely retraced this candle here to then perhaps now move to the downside. And when I draw this correction on a horizontal line, I would suggest that for me to be convinced or sort of expect a move to the downside, first of all, I want to see a correction here, like that, to the downside. Otherwise, if we straight away continue with the same sort of fashion, like I'm about to show, if we continue like that, then that would signal to me that actually we're now meeting the double bottom to then continue higher. But I'm expecting this, given considering what the 4-hour looks like, considering what the daily mainly looks like, the most favorable scenario, at least for now, would be this to the downside. So short-term move would signal weakness within the dollar pair as a whole. So let's take a look at euro dollar to perhaps gauge an understanding into whether that correlation I've just mentioned could indeed hold true. So from the weekly time frame, so very interesting image, which would pair up really nicely to what we just discussed. If the euro is trading against the dollar, that means the dollar is the second pair, meaning if the DXY is showing strength, anything that the US dollar is featuring as a second pair will then show weakness if the correlation was to hold true. And this seems to be the case. So we saw just now on the daily and weekly chart from the DXY that major levels were broken impulsively to the upside, meaning the dollar over the past week or two has been incredibly strong. This is the same image that is depicted by the euro against the dollar. So the euro has been very weakened against the dollar, meaning that the dollar was very strong. That would pair up really nicely with the basket of currencies that we just talked about called DXY. So diving deeper into the daily chart, however, and the 4-hour with a bit more detail, we can see that yes, there's been a very strong impulse to the downside, but we've met price at the double bottom. So let's make that blue to signal a double bottom, meaning that potentially, this is not an exact science, but all we could do is predict projections and prepare for different scenarios. We could see a reversal, move horizontal, and then push higher to target this level first, and then the higher ones as we push even higher over the next few days. So this would pair up really nicely to with what we've just talked about on the DXY. Short-term move to the downside for the DXY, signaling a potential short-term move to the upside for the euro dollar, because again, the dollar is the second pair in question here. This is because obviously we've let's look at the psychology. All a chart is a psychology of, human expectation onto the pricing of an asset, security, or any other thing we can look at. So move to the downside, sellers were in control, so the euro was being very, very weak against the dollar. Then we found like a bottom, so tables were turning, the buyers were coming in and gaining control. Then met this descending trend line, which would pair up with this other trend line, forming a descending channel overall. And my community sort of regards this pattern as a reversal pattern, meaning if we see something like this, which would signal this, roughly speaking, then we could expect higher movement. That wouldn't be the case if the move was completely impulsive. Then obviously that has more potential to trickle its way down. But now, this is not the case. The case is just a descending channel, which is moving quite correctively, so bouncing back and forth, and then retesting this level here, which, as we saw here, was just a double bottom. So then continue higher. I'll wait for the first flag, which in this case would be a bull flag because we're in bullish territory here, to then push even higher. That would pair up really nicely with the DXY, and let's see if we can find any more correlation on another pair. So USD CAD is the second pair I'd like to cover today. When I say second, is because the DXY isn't a pair in itself. That's more of like an index, like if you were to look at the FTSE or the S&P 500, generally speaking. So on the weekly chart, we can see that we've had this external or outer structure indicating a trend line to the upside, which, guess what, matches up perfectly with this double top that we reached in January 2016. So very important level that we haven't reached in nearly 4 years. So daily chart is, however, showing, so this is called evening star. So push to the upside, then doji candle, and then push to the downside to completely sort of retrace all the movement that took place over the past 2 or 3 days. So bullish move, doji, or hanging man, or high test candle, whatever you want to call it, and then move to the downside. This means that the strength that was accumulated all the way here no longer holds true. And in fact, sellers could actually come in and gain control of the situation. So what could we expect further move to the downside? Does that align with the DXY? Yes, because the DXY is showing, at least in my opinion, weakness in the short term, and now the US dollar against the CAD is also showing weakness. This would pair up nicely because the US CAD shows the US as the USD as the first currency, not like the Euro USD, where the USD is the second currency. I hope all of this makes sense, and I'm explaining it quite in a straightforward manner. Now, ascending channel, I was actually expecting here a further move to the upside to do first, second, third touch. That actually didn't take place, but we know we don't have to always respect the patterns. It's more playing the high value area given by this outer ascending channel, therefore represented here by the trend line, and then the double top that we hadn't reached in nearly 4 years. So breaking on the downside here, push to the horizontal line here. That would then indicate a hover. So hover meaning price is just sort of hovering around to then push even lower. You could argue there could have been an entry here on the 15-minute flag, but it's really hard to predict this movement as they happen in the live market scenarios. It's always easy to sort of predict things when they already happened. But unfortunately, that isn't what I predicted. I wasn't actually at the chart, I believe, at that time. So never mind. We'll just move on and look for the next move, because there'll always be another opportunity and another opportunity after that. So we're now retesting these levels here. Important line, because of the fact that now on the 15 we're actually seeing something like an ascending nature, to then move to the downside, because again this would be a corrective style nature representing a reversal pattern to move lower. That represents bearish move to the downside, which would pair up really nicely with USD CAD. First level of target would be this. and then so forth here. But for now, that's what I've got my eyes on. Then that's it for currencies. The others, yes, we could go through them, but they're not as interesting. So pound Aussie has been, as you can see, very choppy, very corrective. Not much of a clear sign of direction. So it would just be a total guess in terms of what the price action could look like in the next few days. What I wanted to show is something interesting. So silver, I don't usually do commodities, but this is in a very key area. So silver, as we can see, let's not even talk about this. So it's seen a very huge sell-off since the 2011 and so forth. So it's no surprise that now we're reaching levels that we hadn't visited in decades. Okay, so as we all know, the dollar was very strong over the past day. That could correlate in theory, although over the past week or two, all of these sort of theories in terms of correlation, well, if the gold goes down, the dollar goes up, they haven't really made a lot of sense. So at this point, let's just judge the situation based purely on the technical standpoint that we see on the chart. 4 hour is then showing very interesting line sign, so reversal could take place quite soon. We're getting ready now. Actually, this could represent, let me go to the 15, something like that. Let's clone it. Would then represent a bullish move to the upside. So that would be impulse, then then correction that we just saw to continue higher. Does that line up with the target I drew? Yes. So that could be quite likely. So yeah, that's what I wanted to cover today in the short video. I hope you've gained some value, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.